7 teams to go in my road to predict all 131 teams this college football offseason. We're so close to the end, and now we're moving on to the Charlotte 49ers. Now, this is a team last year that just barely missed out on a bowl game. It was a team that was very, very close to competing in the postseason. And there are some issues that this team has to fix. But when I overall look at this team, and I've said this before on my channel, I like what the 49ers have coming back last year. And I'm a little bit higher on this team than most are coming into this season. They have a lot coming back offensively. And again, if they can fix some holes on the other side of the ball, which we'll talk about later, this can be a very, very solid team. Can Charlotte find their way into a bowl game in 2022? Or is this going to be another year where the 49ers may struggle and, again, may barely miss out on the postseason? What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate, and welcome to my channel. I'm predicting all 131 teams this college football offseason, which means, hey, I'm doing your favorite team. Chances are I've already done them. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, so you know when I upload these final videos in Conference USA, especially if you're a fan of one of those teams. And you can go through on my channel. After you hit that subscribe button, I got playlists for you guys to look through and find your favorite team. But for Charlotte 49er fans out there, you guys are going to know this team a lot more than I do. So if you feel like I missed something, you want to add something, whatever have you, please leave it in the comment section down below. I'll be happy to hear what you guys have to say. Let's talk about Charlotte in 2022, my 7th ranked team in Conference USA, coming into the 2022 college football season. Now, as I stated last year, this was still a solid football team, but they just barely missed out on the postseason. They were 5-7 and 3-5 overall in conference. And the offense, in my opinion, was not the issue. In fact, they were 5th in Conference USA. Again, this team did have 14 teams in it last year, but they were the 5th team in Conference USA in terms of yards per game. Had 404 yards per game with around 27 points per game. So maybe you get that scoring up a little bit, but this was a very, very solid offense a season ago. Defense was the problem on this team. Now, again, this conference had 14 teams last year, but they were 2nd worst in total yards per game, allowed 465 total yards per game last year, and allowed 34 points per game, which was tied for 3rd worst in the entire conference last year. So, I mean, Charlotte's defense definitely got to pick things up. Definitely got to get some holes filled if this team is going to want to turn around and make a bowl game this upcoming season, which I think they have the potential to as we take a look at some of the talent leaving this team. Not a lot leaving the offense, and, well, the 3 names you see up there are kind of really depth pieces. So, Chavion Smith was a little bit was a depth piece in this running back room. Only had 13 yards last year. That's not a huge loss. In the wide receiver room, kind of the same story. Keith Pearson, Cameron Dollar. Those are 2 names right there that, Keith Pearson was actually the 5th leading receiver last year, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's probably their biggest loss in the offensive end because Cam Dollar had 97 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. Not necessarily the hugest loss ever to anyone out there. But Keith Pearson, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns. You are going to be losing that production. So wide receiver room definitely losing more than any level of the offense. But, hey, not a lot losing the offense in general. But when you look at the defensive end, the same cannot be said. For a defense that already wasn't great last year, they do lose a piece off the defensive line in Mikel Horton, who did have a sack last year, 24 tackles. Linebackers Tyler Murray and Luke Martin are gone. Those were your 2 leading tacklers last year. Both of them each had some semblance of a sack last year as well. And then John Alexander, who was the 4th leading tackler last year, is gone. Also was tied with Luke Martin for the team lead with 2 interceptions. So this is a linebacking group that definitely needs some pieces filled. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then John Alexander, Mikel Horton, 2 pretty solid names. John Alexander, probably their best defensive back last year. And Mikel Horton, very solid piece off that defensive line, is gone from last year. But when you take a look at this Charlotte team, well, there, again, is a lot coming back offensively. Chris Reynolds is coming back on this team. Sorry, just hit my mic. 2,680 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions last year. Chris Reynolds was really, really good for this team a season ago. I think he can be this way again in 2022. I think he's going to be a pretty big staple of what Charlotte does offensively. He had a really good season last year, and I think especially if he can get some help and maybe even just one of these wide receivers to explode and have a really good year, Chris Reynolds is a 3,000-yard passer. I really do believe that. I think Reynolds is going to be a great quarterback for the 49ers this upcoming season, and you can make the case on why he's one of the better quarterbacks in this conference. In the running back room, well, you return your 3 leading rushers from last year. Calvin Camp, who had 635 yards, Shadrick Byrd, who had 583 yards, and then Chavon Micahern, which I probably said that last name wrong. I apologize, but he had 272 yards. And hey, why not? Chris Reynolds was the 4th leading rusher on this team last year with 174 yards. And those 4 names combined, for some quick math here, 12 rushing touchdowns last season. So some pretty solid pieces coming back in the running back room for this team. They should be a really, really deep room. And then the wide receiver room, there's a lot of talent here as well. Grant Dubose at 892 yards and 6 touchdowns. Victor Tucker had 639 yards, 2 touchdowns. Elijah Spencer with 381 yards, 6 touchdowns. Heck, Shadrick Byrd was the 4th leading receiver on this team at 248 yards and 2 touchdowns. And they're getting the tight end back as well in Taylor Thompson with 127 yards and a touchdown from last year. So a lot coming back in that wide receiver room, and probably Grant Dubose would be the best case for a 1,000-yard receiver on this team, especially if some of that offensive play calling stuff can just get that a little bit better. It was still pretty good last year, but hey, there is still room for improvement on this team. In the defensive side, well, you return your best defensive lineman, and Marquise Watts led the team by far with 6 sacks last year. He was also the 3rd leading tackler. Mike Kelly, Jalar Holly, a couple other names on the defensive line. In the linebacker room, again, this is where some things may need some turning around. So B.J. Turner is coming back, I believe, had somewhere around 25 tackles last year. And there are some other solid pieces like Derek Boykins, Prince Bema. I apologize if you hear dogs barking, but when you look elsewhere, I mean, Amir Sadiq is a defensive line linebacker transfer coming over from Central Michigan. So that's a really big pickup right there for this team. They have him as an edge rusher right now. I believe they have him on the defensive line, but he can absolutely is more than capable of playing some linebacker for this team. And then the defensive back position, well, you have Solomon Rogers, Gio Howard, Trey Creamer, some other names coming back on the defensive back side as well. Again, I apologize, my dogs are barking. But hey, when you take a look at this Charlotte team overall, I like what they have coming back offensively. I think the defense can take a step up this year. I do think some players have to kind of come out and play as good, if not better, than what they did last season. And Amir Sadiq has to be a transfer that works out for this defense. Taking a look at their schedule for the Charlotte 49ers, they are one of the few teams that play in Week 0, and it's a road game against Florida Atlantic. That's going to be a very interesting game. The Owls should be able to put up a better win total than they did last year and could be one of, if not the best team in Conference USA this upcoming season. William and Mary starts off their non-conference schedule, and they have some other non-conference games at home against Maryland, on the road against Georgia State, and on the road against South Carolina. The 3 latter ones, they're probably going to have a tough time winning either of them. I'll talk about reasons why in a little bit. But then you get into the rest of their conference slate, along with that road game against Florida Atlantic. They have road games against UAB, Rice, and Middle Tennessee, and games at home against UTEP, FIU, Western Kentucky, and Louisiana Tech. And again, another one of these little scheduling quirks. Their season ends on November 19th instead of November 26th, like most of the rest of the nation. So we will see how that affects Charlotte this year. But again, I don't think it'll be too big of a worry. Let's dive in a little bit to the schedule, starting off with those 3 non-conference games. I don't think they'll have a problem with William and Mary. They should be able to win that game. But taking a look at the rest of this schedule, I mean, you got that home game against Maryland. They're going to have a really good passing attack. They're loaded at wide receiver. Tagovailoa is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten this year. And even though Charlotte gets it at home, yeah, that's just going to be a hard game for Charlotte to win. Then you have that road game against Georgia State, which also is going to be a hard game to win. And Georgia State's a program that's looking to take that next step in the Sun Belt Conference. South Carolina, hey, they're getting Spencer Rattler, Austin Stogner, and more over from the transfer portal. And it's a team that had a lot of success last year and could be one of those teams this year that comes out and surprises a lot of people. So watch out for the Gamecocks. That's also going to be a hard game for Charlotte to win. When you look in conference play, of course, their season starts off with that road game against Florida Atlantic. The Owls only won 5 games last year, but hey, they were looking like a much better team than that last year. I would expect the Owls to be pretty competitive in this conference, maybe even compete for a spot in the conference title game this upcoming season. I like what Florida Atlantic has on that team. Returning N'Kosi Perry, I believe, at quarterback. It's going to be a dangerous Owls squad that Charlotte has to face in week 1. Then you have that home game against UTEP as well. Now, UTEP going to be a better team than I think a lot of people may give them credit for this year. but Charlotte does get it at home, so maybe a little bit of a favorable matchup there. On the road against UAB, going to be a hard game for them to win. But otherwise, when you look at the rest, I do think the rest of this conference schedule, maybe besides Florida Atlantic, UAB, is very, very manageable. I mean, FIU, Rice, Western Kentucky, I think those are even going as far as Middle Tennessee, Louisiana Tech. I think all 5 of those games towards the end of the year are going to be winnable games for Charlotte. Now, Western Kentucky, probably going to be the toughest one out of the bunch there. That's still going to be a solid team, even though they do lose a lot from last season. This is a really interesting schedule for the 49ers, and they will be tested in non-conference play before coming into their thick of the conference slate. I don't do game-by-game predictions. I do a more percentage-based outlook. Tell me, predict the team's record. So if the game is in red, I just don't see you winning the game. If the game is in orange, I still don't see you winning, but it is college football, and upsets can happen. Yellow are your 50-50 or high upset potential games. Games in yellow-green are games that you should win, but you got to watch out for the team on the other side of the ball. And games in green, I have you winning. So William and Mary, I think, will be a win there. I think FIU, Rice, and Middle Tennessee, more likely than not, will be a win. I think the hardest one out of the bunch there is Middle Tennessee, as I'm not super high on that team, but I do recognize the potential that is there with the Blue Raider squad. I mean, those 4 games right there, though, I'm going to go ahead and say that those more likely than not will be wins for Charlotte. But again, Middle Tennessee on the road could be a little bit of a tricky game there for the 49ers down the stretch. When you take a look at those games in non-conference play, and yeah, as you can see, I just don't like their chances in any one of those games. Maryland and South Carolina, 2 Power 5 opponents that I think are going to be pretty competitive and could surprise a lot of people in their respective conferences. Of course, Maryland with that passing attack, South Carolina with the success from last year carried over to now the improved roster this upcoming season. I mean, South Carolina's going to be a dangerous team. Maryland's going to be a dangerous team for anyone on their schedule, especially the Charlotte 49ers, who I don't think are going to have much of a chance against either of them. When you take, and then Georgia State, again, that's a team that's usually very competitive and is going to look to take that next step in the Sun Belt Conference this upcoming year, and they very well may get there this upcoming season. When you take a look at the rest of the conference slate, though, again, that road game against Florida Atlantic, I think, is going to be hard for them to win. I think the Owls are going to be a very, very good football team this upcoming season by Conference USA standards. I think they will push for a spot in that Conference USA title game, which is now a true 1 versus 2. But for FAU, I mean, I do like that Owls team. We'll see what they can do in 2022. UAB, same thing. I mean, UAB may very well be the best team in this conference. They're going to push for a spot in the conference title game. They return a lot from last year. The Blazers, going to be a dangerous team, and Charlotte having to play both those games on the road. I don't like their chances in either of them. But hey, I've said that they have won 4 games already, for more than likely. William and Mary, FIU, Rice, and Middle Tennessee. They just got to win 2 out of these last 3 games. Now, UTEP, Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech. Neither of them are going to be easy wins. UTEP, again, has a lot more returning than I think some people may think. Yes, they lose a lot of wide receiver, but that's still going to be a solid team. Western Kentucky, yeah, they lose a lot, but that'll still be a really good Hilltoppers team. And then Louisiana Tech is sure to improve their win total from a season ago. When I look at the schedule, I do like what Charlotte has on the schedule, and while they are having some tough non-conference games, I do like their conference slate. I think it's very favorable. It sets up very well. I got this team making a bowl game in 2022. So Charlotte, the first team from Conference USA that I've predicted to make a bowl game, and I think they can go as high as 8-4. I do like what this team has. I think this team has a lot of potential, especially offensively. I think the defense is going to improve. I like the 49ers this year, and I do have them making a bowl game at 6-6. That'll do it for my prediction on the 49ers. Hey, remember, like, comment, subscribe. It helps support the channel. And remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.